Hi, in this video I'm talking about the raw chaos of experience and how that raw chaos can open the door to panic, anxiety, depression, stress in your life. But I'm also going to tell you how you can shut that door and how you can stop your brain from creating the experience of anxiety, panic, depression, stress, etc. for you. Now, I'm Dr. David Purvis. I've worked with about 1,000 patients over 30 years in clinical practice in psychology. And what I'm talking about is a synthesis of all of the brain science that I've read about and my understanding of working with people. And it will give you an insight into what anxiety is and how anxiety is created in your brain. You experience it, but your brain creates it for you. And once you understand that, it's a powerful, powerful position for you to start retraining your brain to stop creating the experience of anxiety for you. This video is sponsored by the Anxiety Wizard program. Now, throughout this video, we're talking about retraining your brain. And Anxiety Wizard is an online program that is probably, in my opinion, the best in the world for retraining your brain to stop creating the anxiety programs, the depression programs, etc. for you. It puts you in control of your path. And most people that I talk to, and I'm in clinical practice every week, most people I talk to do not know why they're anxious. They might say, well, something happened in childhood, or I had an accident, or something, a broken relationship. Yeah, okay, those are events in time. But the question is, 20, 30 years ago or more, I mean, why is it still creating anxiety in you now? It's because that event created a brain program, which is like a belief, that still runs and still creates the problem day after day after day. And so, without brain retraining, it's very difficult to be able to be free of these problems that have potentially plagued you for many, many years. Because your brain creates your problems fresh every day. And unless we change the program that creates the problem, well, then nothing changes. So, we think of life as being sort of linear, predictable, past, present, future, etc. And that's our experience. But the reality is this. Your brain is constantly bombarded with a gazillion pieces of information. I mean, just all of the stimuli that is available in the world. And it is fundamentally chaotic. We can't live like that. And so your brain attempts to put structure onto this chaos. And does it in several ways. But let's think of it this first way. The information that comes into your brain comes in code. Photons of light, sound waves, etc., molecules of taste. And I've spoken about this in many other videos. Your brain interprets that information. So, as an example, if you were watching someone play the violin, you'd say, well, I'm hearing the violin. But actually, you're not. The sound waves the violin creates hits your ears. Your brain interprets that as the sound of violin. So, until your brain interprets that sound wave as violin, you're not actually hearing a violin. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but if you think about it, it has to be so, because it's the sound wave that carries the information and your brain interprets it. Now, this is incredibly important. Your brain does not just interpret the raw information. There's also a thing called top-down processing. So the things you believe about yourself, about your world, about how things work, about what's what, is a top-down series of filters which filter out certain kinds of information and preferentially let other kinds of information in. So your experience is what your brain creates, but your brain creates experience based on filters, based on prior experiences and prior assumptions, knowledge, beliefs, etc. So let's think about what this means, because this is the key to understanding virtually all mental health problems, I would suggest. So let's think about perception first of all. Your brain filters out the vast majority of information that is available to it because there's just too much, and it doesn't need that much information to create a relatively stable internal representation of the world. But if it filters out certain kinds of information and it lets other kinds of information in, we say, well, why, how does it know which way to go with that? Well, imagine that you're a person who's not anxious. The world's creative, it's interesting, it's fulfilling, it's full of adventures and opportunities, and so your brain allows information in which concords with that idea of how things are. Yeah, it's creative, it's interesting, yeah, I have a good time, I've got lots of friends, etc. But suppose you're running a program that says I am not safe. A brain program says I'm not safe. A belief I'm not safe. And anybody who's anxious will always say I don't feel safe. So suppose you don't feel safe. Suppose your brain is running a program that life is threatening, the world is threatening, bad things happen. Then you're going to be oversensitive to stimuli, even if they're ambiguous or innocuous really. You're going to be oversensitive to stimuli that can be interpreted as threatening. Now, because threat is incredibly important to your survival, recognizing and dealing with threat, your brain preferentially lets in any kind of stimuli which suggests that the world is frightening and that you're threatened, even if it's ambiguous. And so over time, your brain lets in more and more stimuli that suggest that you're in a dangerous situation and you need to protect yourself, even if you're not. So, the top-down processing, if it's programmed for anxiety, will tend to let in information which it deems important, which suggests that the world is threatening. Now, as far as you're concerned, you will just feel that the world is threatening. You'll see that, well, that's a lot more risky. Well, that's not very dangerous. I couldn't do that. But how will this affect the things that you do? Well, if you think of someone who is not affected by anxiety or depression or anything like that, they will tend to take opportunities. They'll do things. They'll be engaged. They'll say, yeah, I did this and that happened. I did this and that happened. And it'll feel like, you've got some agency in the world. But how will you act if you feel threatened and not safe? Well, I can't do that because something bad might happen. Well, if I did that, you never know what might happen. It could be terrible. Well, I can't do that because there'd be a catastrophe. So we have catastrophization. We have distortion of experiences. We've got a limitation of your comfort zone. Someone who's not anxious has a bigger comfort zone. Someone who is anxious has a smaller comfort zone. And that comfort zone is determined by how your brain processes just the incoming stimuli. The thing is, the stimuli is the same for everyone. Whether you're anxious or not, the stimuli is the same for everyone. Let's just think about your intentions. The intentions you have for your life kind of link things together. Someone who is not anxious, may intend to do this and that and travel and do this kind of job. Someone who is anxious is going to restrict the possibility of things happening by restricting their intention, by making less things likely to happen. So intention, which then also means how you see yourself in the future, gets much smaller and more inhibited. And finally, storytelling, narrative. We create a narrative about our experience, and that narrative can either be a narrative of excitement, creativity, interest, adventure, everything's fine, or it can be a narrative of everything's frightening, everything's risky. You better not push yourself out of your comfort zone because you never know what's going to happen. The future is uncontrollable, and it feels as if your life is fractured, spiraling, disjointed. So can you see how all brains perceive the same stimuli, but some brains interpret it as threatening and others do not? Now, I find this incredibly fascinating because what it gives us is it gives us the possibility of choice. Before you understand that your brain is creating the experience of anxiety, depression, panic, stress, etc. for you by interpreting the chaos of life in a particular way which is either threatening or not threatening, once you realize that, you have the ability to change the brain programs that are responsible for this top-down processing. That means then that once you start to change the beliefs that you have about things, it starts to free you up to act in particular ways which are more freeing, more expansive, more creative. It enables you to set goals which are more intentional to achieve the things you want rather than trying to avoid the things you don't want. And it enables you to create a story about yourself which is useful and fruitful, and one which has got a happy outcome. Now, as I said at the beginning, I've worked with about 1,000 people, and I talk to people every week who, say, I've been anxious all my life. I've been anxious 20 years, 30 years. I've been depressed. I've worried all my life. And these are simply the byproducts of your brain processing information, innocuous, ambiguous information in particular ways. These are not necessarily expressions of the reality that you have to have. But unless you change the way your brain processes information, then what would change? You've got to take responsibility for reprogramming your brain to give you the life you want. Otherwise, it will give you the life you already have, and it will continue to do that, because why would it change? If you want to get on top of retraining your brain to train it out of anxiety, panic, depression, stress, etc., then I would recommend that you try the Anxiety Wizard program. First week's free. There's a link in the description below, and thereafter it's very inexpensive, but it will give you everything you need to retrain your brain. And all that's required really is the intention to have a better experience. Now, that's not the same as the desire to not have the experience you're having. Not having the experience you're having is dissatisfaction, fair enough, but it's not the intention to make a change. It's the intention to make a change which is the critical thing, and that's all you have to have, because you can't change your brain programming in a day. It takes a little bit of time, it takes a little bit of consistency, and the intention to have a better life, a better experience, is what drives you forward. So I hope you find this interesting. Please check out the Anxiety Wizard program, because it will give you a very, very good path forward for getting panic, anxiety, depression, stress out of your life. And it will also let you see that you have huge amount more agency in creating the reality you experience than you might imagine. I know it's all hidden because we experience what we experience, but what I've been telling you about are the actual scientific brain processes behind that experience. As I've said in the previous video, awareness is the first act of freedom. Once you're aware of the path you're on, then you can make changes. And I hope that this video has helped you become a little bit more aware of the kinds of ways that your brain sabotages you. Not deliberately, but nevertheless, it creates an experience that you perhaps don't want.